Hello, I'm Dr. Brian Abelson. Today we're at Gords Running Store with Gord Hobbins. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of go over some of the common questions that patients actually ask me. First thing is they say, what's a good resource when it comes to running shoes? Where should I go? I'm either a beginner runner, or I've been doing marathons for a long time. I really like to know a little bit more about shoes, and I'd like to know about this new thing you're talking about minimal support shoes.
That's the essence I find is important, is really establishing what the individual needs in their footwear concerns, because it'll vary widely. You'll have people who come in who are stuck on one particular type of shoe, and they don't want to deviate from that shoe in any way, shape, or form. Then you get other people who do want to experiment with like the minimalist type shoes, or they want to experiment with, well, maybe that brand has just something a little bit unique about it, maybe I'll try it. So you want to make sure that people, if they do veer off that sort of tried and true type shoe, that we're going to try to guide them as well as we can with our experience, so that they're going to feel confident that, yeah, they're still going to be able to get by and use that shoe, get the maximum use from that shoe that they're intended to.
Excellent, excellent.
So Gord, how do you determine what shoe is appropriate for individuals?
The bigger thing I find when people, if they can come in with their tried true, the used shoes, that helps immensely to see a few things. Mechanically, we can look at people in their stocking feet, we can watch them walk and do these sorts of things, and they can have some characteristics that are common to the person who overpronates or rolls badly inwards, people who are up nice and straight, or people go outwards. Mechanically, they can look like that. But if we can see the wear patterns on their old shoes, we can see a few things. We can help establish if it's a normal wear pattern. Typically, the outside of the heel to the center of the forefoot is usually a normal wear pattern. But if they come from here and they come way over the big toe, that may be a telltale sign of going inwards, and likewise if they're going off the outside. Then, once we see that mechanically they're doing one or the other, then we take a look at their old shoe to see if they were wearing the correct shoe. In the event that a person was having the feet that rolled inwards quite a bit, whether they had some form of second density or firmness on the inside of the shoe to help compensate for that. And then we want to see if that shoe's worked for them. Mechanically, if the shoe works for you, it should just eventually wear kind of thin in the forefoot. I joke with people that when they run down the sidewalk and they step on a coin, and if they can determine the date of the coin without actually looking at it through the softness of the shoe, that's a good clue saying, okay, the shoe's gone.
Okay.
It's time to replace it.
Yeah.
Because the shoe's cushioning in the forefoot is no longer protecting them. So if it's just wearing out in this area, what should happen is the shoe should always remain nice and straight. If the shoe shows signs of going inwards, then it's a no-brainer. The shoe didn't give them enough support. If the shoe is being pushed outwards, then this amount of support is pushing them out.
Okay.
So the second thing I like to try to establish and people understand is what is a control or stability type shoe and what is a neutral shoe. And the big component is the medial side or the inside of the shoe's running shoe construction. If it has some form of different color in that area, it usually notes it's a firmer density. If it doesn't have anything, it's usually a neutral shoe.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, great. Good to know.
So Gord, one of the things I want to talk about is minimal support shoes. We've been doing some filming at a number of marathons. We see people out with 5-finger toes, and we see people barefoot, and I know that Nike and some of the other different companies have had minimal support shoes for a while. But I understand there's also an evolution that's taking place in terms of the products that are available. So what would you have to say about this subject, and how should people address this? I mean, I can't see us really running around in some areas with bare feet in the middle of winter here in Calgary, 30 below zero, and probably not the best environment.
No, certainly not. And the big thing is, again, the big push for the minimalist type crowd or barefoot running type crowd is how they want to try to say, well, like evolutionarily, we've been walking around on bare feet for a millennia.
Right.
And all of a sudden, in the late 70s, we get the higher heeled running shoes to satisfy the big boom in the running injuries. So you have a major industry that's created around the running category, from the 70s. And they are tough to change. You have, I like to liken it to a freighter going across the ocean. And that freighter is the running industry. And all of a sudden there was this little blip, this little boy floating off in the distance. And they looked with their binoculars and said, oh, it's a barefoot running. Said, oh, it's just a fad, it's going to pass. And
right.
But here we are 5 to 6 years later, and now we have a whole wall full of a category shoes, which is referred to as minimalist running. And some of those big suppliers are also coming into this because they realize that it's not going away, and they have to pay a little bit more attention to it. So that being said, I find the biggest thing to try to get people to realize that when you go to the classically designed shoe, you'll have a heel on the shoe. I'll grab one of these ones because they're a little less of a heel on it. When you go to the classically designed shoes, they're anywhere from 10 to 12 millimeters on average. Higher in the heel than they are in the forefoot. Right. When you go into the minimalist type shoes, I throw things into our wall that are anywhere from 6 millimeters or lower. Just so there's a noticeable difference in your heel height. And what happens when you're running with a shoe that has a higher heel, when we walk, when we run, your lower leg goes through a series of rotational type forces. When we toe off, our foot wants to splay out to the outside, our toe pointing off to the outside again. As it comes across, your leg starts to rotate inwards. And because that heel wedge comes down and it's so high, it forces you to strike in front of your center of mass. So you typically heel strike on the outside, your foot starts to go through a series of rotational forces, transferring shock up your leg, through your lower leg, as efficiently as it is meant to do with that high-heeled shoe. When you go into the minimalist type shoes, the heel wedge now being removed, your heel is now lower, so now when your foot comes down, it no longer strikes in front of you. It's easier for your foot to strike beneath you.
So you're going to land midfoot, or it forces you to a midfoot position.
When you can land in a midfoot position, your leg no longer does the rotational type force. It literally is already straightened out. It's in a straight up and down type fashion. So when you get shock from this ankle joint, your knee joint, and your hip. It's just like one big spring. They absorb the shock a little bit further up the whole leg. And they found the impact forces to be a little bit decreased. Rather than having one sharp spike at the heel strike area, then a down, and then another one when you go to toe off, in the classic design type shoe, you basically get a little bit more of a uniform shock wave right at the impact point.
Correct me if I'm wrong too, but also when you land in that position, you absorb the shock, but you also, there's a component of elastic recoil. You actually store energy and then you release energy, and then it's a lot more efficient in terms of forward momentum.
I find the easiest way to try to get people to prepare for it is get them prepared that, okay, your stride's going to be shorter and it's going to be a higher cadence, and rather than pushing off your toe for propulsion, you're basically going to fall forward, lean forward, and just lift your foot up, When your foot lifts up, it literally just flops down.
So what turnover rate would you recommend?
I mean, you'll hear the most common one that they mechanically think that most people should get the best efficiency from is about 180 steps per minute. Or 3 steps per second.
So moving up from the knee, essentially, leaning forward slightly, and then the cadence should be at 180 somewhere.
And the theory behind the cadence is most people when they run the average 10K, they're going to be anywhere from about the high 160s to maybe 174, whether they realize it or not. So when you initially tell people 180, that sounds like a lot. But if you actually have a metronome, you try to match it up with people's stride, most people are the high 160s to 170s, or sorry, low 170s. What they'll find is with the slightly slower cadence, every time you take a step, if we were to watch the side of my head from a distance, you'd see my head going down, up, down, and up, down and up from the side. And as we go down and up, we're getting more downward sort of stress. We're wasting energy by traveling down along. When you do that 180 steps per minute, there's very little downtime. for your head to go up and down, so you're not wasting as much energy by having a longer type stride. So that's the theory behind it.
No, this is all great advice, because it's such a common question I get from my patients is, you know, who do I go see? Who's going to basically explain this logic to me? Because I've heard so many different things, but I'm also getting contradictory information from people. So it's really nice to hear it.
Yeah. Well, it's so common. You go on various blogs and things like that, and you hear people who attempt to go to the minimalist type thing, and the biggest thing is not understanding the technique or not latching on to a technique that they can comprehend. Because you can go, if you look at natural posture running, cheating running, Alexander method, so there's a whole host of them out there. The one common element is they're all selling the mid-foot, forefoot type stride.
Right.
But some of them can be like information overload. So I try and tell people is, I know the Newton running site, they have a whole host of videos as far as technique goes, and they is find one or two that you feel comfortable with the explanations, and then use that as your go-to reference from time to time until you feel comfortable with it.
So learn some basics and then build on that just slowly over a period of time.
Exactly, until you feel comfortable.
Okay,
So.
excellent. Okay, Gord, appreciate it a lot, and you're definitely a great resource, and highly recommend that if you want to check out a really, really good store, come over to Gords Running Store. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Great.